Echoes of home. After standing in the cool twilight for what felt like an eternity, Maren felt relief wash over her as the service concluded. She pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders and glanced at her older brother. Kyle stood nearby, lost in thought, the fading light casting shadows across his face. Their mother, Hale, stood by the freshly turned soil, a small bouquet of wildflowers cradled in her hands. With a tender touch, she scattered the petals over the grave, a bittersweet smile gracing her lips as she turned to her children. "It's time to go home," she said. Both siblings nodded in agreement, and the trio began the somber journey back to the cottage that had always felt like home for Maren. The old house had seen better days. Maren noted the vine creeping over the stone walls and the worn shingles clinging desperately to their places. The windows, framed with aging wood, held hints of wear that spoke of years without repair. Hale's cherished garden, once a vibrant tapestry of colors, now lay overgrown and untended. Regret tugged at Maren. She wished she had returned sooner. "Brought back some memories, huh?" Kyle remarked as they approached the door. Maren glanced at the sagging roof and nodded, memories flooding her thoughts. "Something like that," she replied softly, following him inside. The familiar scent of wood smoke and nostalgia enveloped her as they entered. They hung their jackets by the door and sank into the comforting embrace of worn furniture, draped in quilts. Hale moved to tend the fireplace, coaxing it back to life while inviting them to settle in. "Stay a while," Kyle suggested, glancing at Maren. "What's the rush?" Maren hesitated. "I think we should tackle some of this together. Mom's been doing it by herself for too long." Kyle leaned back, a skeptical look crossing his features. "You really think that's practical? There's a lot to fix." "I mean it," Maren insisted, frowning as the warmth of the fire enveloped them. "This place is in worse shape than I remembered, and she shouldn't have to face all of this alone." Kyle sighed, brushing his fingers through his hair. "You know I can't stay. My unit needs me." He glanced at their mother, who moved through the room as if processing memories. "It's just, I don't want to leave her like this." The unspoken tension hung between them, and Maren wanted to argue, to plead with him to stay. Instead, she simply nodded, anxious thoughts swirling in her mind. "Mom worries too much," Kyle remarked, almost as an afterthought as the fire crackled to life. Hale returned, holding bowls of soup she'd prepared earlier, handing one to each of them. "Thank you, Hale," Maren said, almost absent-mindedly, while trying to focus on the meal before her rather than the weight of the conversation. A knock on the door shattered the moment, and Maren stood up, wanting to shake off the sadness that lingered in the air. "I'll see who it is," she said, making her way down the hall. "Maren, is that you?" called a familiar voice. Maren's heart raced at the sound. "Briar," she replied, pausing briefly at the door to steady her breath. She opened it to find Briar standing there, her dark hair slightly mussed by the wind and rain, holding a basket filled with freshly baked bread and herbs. "I hope I'm not interrupting," Briar said, grinning. "I brought some supplies I thought you might need." Maren felt an unexpected swell of warmth at the sight of her old friend, memories flooding back. "No, not at all," she replied, stepping aside to let Briar enter. Hale approached with a bright smile. "Briar. How wonderful to see you." The two women embraced warmly. "I'm glad I caught you," Briar said, glancing around the cozy room. "I just had a feeling you might need a little help around here." Maren couldn't help but feel grateful as Briar settled in. The comfort of friendship filled the room, where laughter soon mingled with the aroma of the soup. It was good to see Briar again after all this time. They had spent many evenings discussing their dreams, hopes, and lives together. As they shared stories and laughter, Kyle interjected playfully, teasing Maren about the last occasion they had been together. "I don't think I've ever seen her smile like that before," he said with a mischievous grin. Maren rolled her eyes, but couldn't help the small smile that crept onto her lips. She was happy, maybe even lighter, if only for a moment. "Well, we will have to keep this going," Briar chimed in, looking at Maren. Let's make sure you're not left alone to handle all this mess. Maren felt a surge of gratitude, knowing she wouldn't be alone in sorting through the memories, the good, the bad, and the painful. As they sat together, the shadows of the past and the weight of responsibilities echoed all around. But with cherished friends and family gathered close, Maren realized she was ready to face the challenges ahead. Whatever it takes, she whispered resolutely to herself, as she took a sip of her soup and felt the warmth of connection and support seep into her bones. The echoes of home were calling, and she wouldn't hide from them any longer. The evening wore on, filled with laughter and the comforting sounds of clinking dishes and the crackling fire. Maren, Kyle, and Briar exchanged stories that flowed easily like the soup in their bowls, settling into a rhythm that felt all too familiar. "I still can't believe you decided to come back," Briar teased Maren, leaning back in her chair. "The last time I saw you, you were off chasing adventures in the greater cities. What changed?" Maren paused, a flicker of uncertainty shadowing her features. The weight of her father's recent passing loomed heavy in her mind, and the notion of home had shifted, becoming a refuge rather than just a come-and-go place. "Life has a way of pulling you back when you least expect it," she said softly, glancing at Kyle. "I think I needed to find my way back here. To help. To reconnect." Kyle nodded knowingly, the teasing glimmer in his eyes tempered by an undercurrent of understanding. "That sounds like a noble reason," he replied. "But don't forget, Maren, this isn't just about fixing old walls. There's more to it than that." Hale joined them again, setting down a fresh batch of bread in the center of the table. "Dinner is hardly complete without a bit of sweetness at the end, right?" she said, her smile contagious. Maren watched her mother, her heart warmed by the sight of Hale's determination to keep their home alive, despite the challenges they faced. But Maren was acutely aware that it wasn't just the house that needed mending, it was the bonds they shared and the memories they had almost let fade away. "Once we polish this place up, we should have a gathering," Briar suggested, her eyes sparkling. "Invite the townsfolk. Rekindle the warmth this home used to have." "That's actually a great idea," Maren said, feeling a sense of determination swell within her. "Maybe we can turn this into a community project." Kyle raised an eyebrow. "You're in for a lot of work if you do that. Are you sure you're ready for it?" "Absolutely," Maren replied, a smile stretching across her face. "I want to see this place come alive again." "I'm in too," Briar chimed in enthusiastically. "We can draw up a list of the repairs, gather supplies, maybe even recruit some of the neighbors." Hale looked at her children with appreciation, her eyes shining. "You two are growing up, and I'm so proud of you both. With your heart set on helping, we can bring a lot of joy back to this place." "Makes me feel a bit like a project manager," Kyle remarked, grinning as he relaxed back into his seat. The idea flowed easily between them, and before long, they were sketching plans to revitalize not only the house but the garden that had been neglected for far too long. Maren could almost picture the vibrant colors of flowers blooming under the sun, laughter filling the air. "We need to make it strong and beautiful," Maren said, eyes flickering with excitement. "So it can be a place people want to gather again." As night deepened, their conversation shifted to memories of past gatherings. Tales played out like the flickering shadows of the fire, highlighting moments from childhood, baking cookies in the kitchen, dancing to the music of their mother's laughter, and sharing secrets late into the night. Each story recounted brought Maren closer to both her family and her roots. Eventually, as the fire crackled down to embers, Kyle stood up. "I should go check in with some friends before I leave." "Don't want to leave them hanging." Briar nodded. "Good idea. Just remind everyone about our plans, okay?" As he stepped outside, Maren turned to Briar, her heart full. "I can't tell you how much it means to have you here, Briar. It feels right, you know." Briar smiled softly, her dark curls framing her face. "It does, doesn't it? Sometimes it's hard to see what's right in front of us. We lose our way, but the right people can always help guide us back." Maren nodded, a sense of gratitude washing over her. "I want to do this right. Not just for the house, but for all of us. We deserve to reclaim this space and fill it with good memories. And we will, Briar replied, reaching across the table to squeeze Marin's hand. I'm with you every step of the way. Just then, Kyle returned, watching the two friends with a bemused expression. What's this? He asked, mock suspicion dancing in his eyes. A secret plan without me? Marin laughed and waved him closer. No secrets, just dreams of a beautiful garden and a cozy home filled with laughter again. Count me in, Kyle said with renewed enthusiasm. As the three of them huddled around the table, long into the depths of the night, ideas began to flow freely, about flowers to plant, gatherings to host, and adventures to share. Marin felt a spark of hope blossom within her, igniting the essence of home. In this echo of her past, Marin realized that while they had lost one loved one, they still had each other. Together, they would forge a future filled with connection and reclamation. They would breathe new life into the walls that once echoed with joy, together painting their canvas anew, layer by layer. With each passing day, Marin understood that no matter where life led her, the strongest ties would always guide her back home. The next few days brimmed with newfound energy. Marin, Kyle, and Briar devised a plan, transformed the house and garden into a sanctuary, a gathering place for friends and neighbors. They began with a list of projects, a way to honor the memories of the past while creating new ones. Marin took it upon herself to revive the garden, envisioning vibrant flowers and herbs that would bless the household with beauty and sustenance. Under Briar's enthusiastic guidance, they strolled through town, gathering seeds and plants from local merchants and farmers. Each visit was laced with laughter, and Marin felt her spirit swell with connection, both to her friends and to her roots. Let's get some of these wildflowers, too, Briar suggested, pointing to a colorful assortment. They'll attract butterflies and bees. It'll be beautiful. I like that idea, Marin agreed, imagining the dance of colors and life that would fill the garden once more. Meanwhile, Kyle tackled interior repairs with determination. He dusted off his old tools and climbed the rickety ladder to fix the roof tiles that had started to sag. I'll only be here a few more days, so let's get as much done as we can, he declared as he climbed. Hale watched them, her heart swelling with pride. For the first time in years, the old house echoed with the sounds of hammers and laughter, rather than silence and solitude. By the end of the week, the first sprouts of the garden were breaking through the soil, and the house began to feel less like a relic of the past and more like a vibrant space filled with possibilities. Their evenings transformed into cozy gatherings filled with the aroma of home-cooked meals shared with local friends and neighbors. One afternoon, as the sun cast its golden light upon the cottage, Marin heard a familiar voice calling from the doorway. Marin. Are you home? She turned, her heart racing with excitement as she recognized the voice. Yes. Come in. It was Sandra, a radiant smile lighting up her face as she stepped inside, shaking off the remnants of rain. I couldn't stay away, she said as she approached. I brought some seedlings from my garden. Marin felt warmth bloom in her chest. You really didn't have to, she exclaimed, stepping forward to help Sandra with her basket. Oh, but I wanted to. That garden is going to be gorgeous, and I thought it'd be fun to plant something together. As they settled in, Marin noticed how easily the conversation flowed between them. They chatted about their visions for the garden, the memories of summers spent together, and life in the village. Marin found herself wanting to share more, about her travels, what she had seen, and the yearning for connection she felt upon returning. You've always had adventure in your heart, Sandra said, her eyes sparkling with appreciation. But don't forget, there is adventure right here too, sometimes we overlook it. Marin nodded, understanding the truth of Sandra's words more deeply than ever. Sometimes what we seek isn't as far away as we think. I'm learning that now. As they planted the seedlings, their hands worked side by side, the silence between them filled with comfortable familiarity. It was a different kind of thrill, one that felt rooted in friendship and mutual respect rather than romance. Marin appreciated it all too much, realizing how much she missed having Sandra nearby. Let's invite everyone over again soon, Sandra suggested, wiping her brow. I think a potluck would be perfect. We can ask everyone to bring a dish, who knows what delights we'll discover. That sounds wonderful. Maren agreed, her enthusiasm bubbling over. We'll make it a real celebration. I'll even cook some of that stew I loved as a child. The thought of laughter, connection, and togetherness promised to fill the air. It was something she had longed for, an atmosphere of warmth that made a house truly feel like home. The following week, Maren, Kyle, Briar, and Sandra worked tirelessly, tidying up the cottage and polishing the garden until it sparkled. The evening of the potluck arrived, bursting with festivity. Neighbors gathered, bringing dishes rich with tradition, hearty stews, fresh-baked bread, and decadent pies. As Maren greeted each guest, she felt a surge of warmth ripple through her, the kind she had yearned for. Laughter echoed, stories flowed, and for a moment, life felt joyous and normal. The broken tendrils of grief loosened their grip, revealing space for healing and connection. After dinner, as the stars began to twinkle overhead, Kyle strummed his guitar, the soft notes carrying over the gathering. Maren's heart swelled as she watched the faces of family and friends light up in the flickering firelight. She caught Sandra's gaze across the glow, and the moment felt electric, a tether to the past intertwining with the promise of the future. Here's to homecoming, Kyle declared, raising his glass. Let's celebrate not just the house, but the wonderful people who make it alive. Everyone echoed his sentiment, their voices joining in a chorus of joy. For Maren, surrounded by laughter and love, it truly felt like a home once more. As the night deepened, Maren knew they had not only revived a house but reignited the bonds that tied them all together. Life would continue to change and challenge them, but in this moment, they stood resilient and ready for whatever lay ahead. Maren's heart, filled to the brim, accepted the truth. Home wasn't simply a place. It was a feeling, an echo of love that would always guide her back, no matter how far she wandered. Embracing the present, she felt happier than she had in a long time. As the evening wore on, the gathering blossomed into a tapestry of laughter, music, and cherished stories, each moment stitched together by the warmth of connection. Maren watched as the flickering flames of the fire danced against the starry sky, her heart swelling with gratitude. Surrounded by community, she felt a sense of peace settle within her, a knowing that she had found her place once again. The night wore on, with singing and storytelling weaving a rich atmosphere of belonging. Maren found herself exchanging glances with Kyle, and she saw how the laughter transformed him as well. He was no longer the weary soldier rushing back to duty but rather the brother who had created fond memories in their childhood home. At one point, Briar leaned over and whispered, "Did you ever think it would feel like this again?" Maren shook her head with a smile. "Not in my wildest dreams. I thought returning would only remind me of the things we lost." "And yet," Briar said, glancing around the firelit faces, "it seems we are discovering what we have gained." Maren nodded, her gaze drifting to Sandra, who was engaged in animated conversation with some neighbors. There was a lightness in Sandra's demeanor that made Maren's heart skip. Often, she found herself recalling the significance of that first reconnection, how it had helped in stitching the fabric of her home anew. As the night wore into early morning, Kyle started wrapping up his guitar, the soft notes fading into the background as conversations began to quiet. Maren could see a sense of fulfillment welling up in their mother's eyes as she moved among the guests, her movements graceful, a satisfied smile etched upon her face. "Tonight was remarkable," Hale said, as she approached Maren and Briar. "Thank you both for bringing us all together. You've instilled life back into this old home." Maren felt a rush of emotion. "We're just getting started, Mom. There's so much left to do." "Please, don't feel the pressure to do everything at once," Hale reassured her gently. "Sometimes, the most beautiful things take time and patience to blossom. And you've already done much by just being here." As the last guests began to departure, Maren caught Sandra's gaze and waved her over. "You should stay, at least for a bit longer," she suggested. "I don't want this to end so soon." Sandra smiled warmly, her dark eyes shining with fondness. "I'd like that. I was hoping to help out in the garden tomorrow if you need me." Of course. It's so much more fun working together. Briar stood and stretched, yawning as she looked towards the door. I, for one, could use some rest. Tomorrow is another day of planting and planning. Agreed, Kyle chimed in. But don't forget the snacks. We'll need to fuel up before all that hard work. With goodbyes exchanged, the guests departed, leaving the cottage enveloped in a calming quiet. Maren helped her mom clean up the last remnants of the potluck, restoring the kitchen to its prior state. As Maren washed the dishes, she felt a sense of contentment wash over her. Here, surrounded by family and friends, she noticed how close they had grown over the past few days. Their laughter, once a distant memory, now filled the air again, affirming the bonds they shared. Did you see everyone's faces tonight? Hale asked, her voice filled with a warmth that mirrored Maren's heart. They remember what this home meant to them, and now you and your brother are making it a home once more. Maren took a moment to reflect. It's not just the house itself, is it? It's the connections we nurture here. It's the laughter and love that transform a mere structure into a home. Exactly, Hale said, her eyes twinkling with pride. And you've taught me that sometimes, welcoming others into our space creates that love, not just for us, but for everyone around. After finishing up, Maren stepped outside for a moment, wanting to feel the cool night air again. The stars twinkled like diamonds against the velvety sky, and she breathed deeply, letting the tranquil atmosphere wash over her. Maren, Sandra's voice broke through the stillness, and Maren turned to see her standing a few steps away, a soft smile on her face. Mind if I join you? Not at all, Maren replied, motioning for her to come closer. They shared a comfortable silence, both gazing up at the stars. Maren felt a sense of kinship with Sandra, as if they had stood on this brink of life together many times before. This feels magical, Maren finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. It does, Sandra agreed, her gaze still fixed on the sky. Every moment we share adds a little more magic to life, doesn't it? Maren turned to her, the firelight illuminating their faces. I want to cherish this, us, while we can. Sandra nodded, understanding deepening between them. Me too. We'll make new memories, and I want you to know I'll always be here, whether it's rain or shine. That moment hung heavy with unspoken promises, and Maren felt as if they were tethered together by shared memories and newfound hopes. As the stars began to fade, heralding the incoming dawn, Maren felt a renewed sense of purpose. Whatever the future held, she knew they had the strength to embrace it, to face what lay ahead together. Together, they would cultivate a garden that would blossom not only with flowers but with memories that would last a lifetime. Maren took a final breath of the crisp night air, her heart ready for the adventures ahead, knowing that in this place, this home, she would always find her way, surrounded by those she loved. Hand in hand, they turned back toward the warmth of the cottage, laughter echoing once more in the heart of home, as the first light of dawn painted the horizon with hope.